artifacts in your displays and things like that. But the first thing that comes to mind is, I'm a museum curator. This is great. So I just wanted you to know that I'm highly impressed with the job that y'all have done here. Am I too, well, if I get too loud or something, let me know, because I actually once was trying to be a rock and roll star, and I can be very loud. So anyway, so I'm Graham Perry. I'm from the Tennessee Historical Commission. I am the Historic Cemetery Preservation Specialist. It's relatively a brand new position. I mean, literally I'm the first one, and I'm the only one in the state of Tennessee. I always try to think to myself, I'm like, well, should I tell people that I'm the Cemetery Preservation Specialist at the Tennessee Historical Commission, or should I just say for the state of Tennessee? It sounds bigger when you say the state of Tennessee. But anyway, I do work for the Historical Commission. So today I'm going to talk to you a little bit. This is actually, I have several presentations, but this is one I've been getting requests for throughout the state. And, you know, my big job for me is educating people. As you can imagine, before I existed, or before my position existed, people had mythologies about what the rules were and what the laws were, and everybody had a different mythology. So what I'm trying to do is go across the state and have everybody have a uniform mythology, or not a mythology, but acts. So, I do want to point out that, you know, most people's idea about a cemetery, they look at headstones and they say that's a cemetery. But I can tell you right now that most of the graves throughout the state of Tennessee are not marked. People of means, or people that could at least afford a headstone, bought headstones. Some of them are handmade. Some of them, the makers just donated them. I know William Edmondson looks like that. But if you see, like this, for example, was put here by a family. I'm sure they paid a lot of money for that. It's the memorial at the William Ewing Cemetery in Nashville. But this was at an African-American cemetery that's at Mount Olive Baptist Church in Robertson County. And this is probably one of the best preserved graves. Many out there have nothing. People tended to mark for their families so that they could come back and visit, whether or not they had a big fancy stone or not. Sometimes, a lot of times there were wooden markers, things like that, and those, of course, as you can imagine, are gone. A lot of times I see, you know, the funeral home little tags. A lot of times I see them marked with that, and of course they're deteriorated and things. Nobody ever came back to get to put a stone up. So it's very interesting. All right. Tennessee law overview. Well, why do I have a picture of William Blackstone? Well, I'll tell you in a minute. But keep him in mind, keep the U.S. Constitution in mind, because we'll talk about that as well. So Tennessee law has some strong points right now, and it also has weak points. And I will compare them. First of all, we have the Family Graves Protection Act, which Steve McDaniel forwarded. He's actually created my position too. It is Tennessee Code Annotated 46.8, and so it is specifically for protecting family graves. These ones that are on people's property that people don't know about. I mean, it can be a small. In Tennessee, one grave is a cemetery, just to let you know. Actually, it can be 0 too, as long as it's been designated as a cemetery. We'll talk about that. But the big thing is, the big problem is many people don't read it before taking whatever action they want to take. Which is why I'm here, because they can call me if they don't know. The relocation process is clear. Tennessee does have an established relocation process, and it's in 46.4, which we'll talk about. The problem is relocation is expensive, and so sometimes people think that non-compliance is worth the risk. Another reason why I'm here, because I watch. I love it. Tax incentives exist, but the benefits are tiny. Tennessee desecration law is very clear. I mean, well, with a slight exception, which I'll talk about. But enforcement depends on locality. Most localities do what they're supposed to, but sometimes I find that some localities aren't really aware of this and what they're supposed to do when certain problems happen. Criminal penalties are established in TCA 39, and we'll talk about that. Well, the weak point of that is it's defined in TCA 39 and not TCA 46. TCA 46 is about cemeteries. So why isn't TCA 39 in TCA 46? I don't know, you tell me. Then there's this nice little decision that was done back in 1911 that sets a precedent we'll talk about. Hines versus Tennessee strengthens the cemetery law that was put on the books since 1911. But the problem is a lot of it is not included in Title 46, which can cause confusion. We will talk about that in a second. I love talking about confusion. Okay, so TCA 46, the whole TCA 46 is about commercial, any kind of cemetery, military cemetery, anything you can imagine. The two that really kind of pertain to this office are TCA 46-4 and 46-8, although I do dabble in some of the other stuff as well. So in TCA 46-4, it's about, what it's for is it covers termination of use of land as a cemetery. And they did that on purpose because, as I like to tell people, Tennessee's probably just one giant cemetery. It's like if you walk from the end, there's no telling how many people are buried out here and where. So they had to kind of codify something so that when people wanted to develop properties, they would have a process. It was actually established in the 1950s and people haven't been following the process, but now I'm here and so people are. 46-4-101, if you want to move a cemetery, what you have to prove is that it's abandoned or threatened. 46-102 defines interested persons, which basically are family members. Talk about that a little bit. 46-4-103 describes the process for termination that you have to go through. And 46-4-104 has the provisions for reinterment. It tells you what you're supposed to do when you reinter those bodies. Corpses. What should I say? Graves. Sorry. TCA 46-8, on the other hand, is the Family Burial Grounds Protection Act. 46-8-103, it describes that landowners have a duty to protect graves, but there's some special things about that we'll go into. 103A, it declares that when a landowner sells a property and there is a known cemetery on the property, they have to include it on the deed of transfer. A lot of people don't know that. A lot of people don't probably try to forget that, if they know it. 103B, it defines what boundaries of a cemetery, what are protected against development if you don't move a cemetery. It gives you parameters that you have to keep clear of. And 104C basically refers you back, if you want to move the graves, you go back to 46-4. So, 46-1. 46-1-102, definitions. So in Tennessee, a cemetery is any land or structure in the state dedicated to and used or intended to be used for interment of human remains. One grave is a cemetery. In Arkansas, I think it's 4. Cemetery can even have no graves. Intention is all you need to prove that it's a cemetery. That's one of the things that people, I'm working on a problem right now because a landowner thinks there are no burials in the cemetery, so he thinks he can just ditch the cemetery. I'm like, no, it is a tax-exempt, separate plot of land. You cannot sell it, you cannot develop it, it's not yours. but there's no bodies there. I'm like, so, sorry, dude. Cemetery purposes, any and all things requisite or necessary for, or incident or convenient to the establishment, maintenance, management, operation, improvement, and conduct of a cemetery. The preparation of the premises for interment and the interment of the human dead. That's a big one. Human, not pets. And care, preservation, and embellishment of cemetery property. This is why people get lawyers, because I don't know what the heck all that means, and I have to decipher it every time I read it. I will point out, it's really interesting, they have a gravesite in Robertsville, and that is the marker that they put down that's a commemorative marker, but they also still have the same old grave marker that was originally put there, which is when you are doing any kind of if you want to commemorate somebody that has a marker already, the big key is don't touch that marker, do something separate from it so you don't damage the marker. Because now, that marker will go away someday. As Dan Pomeroy used to tell us at the Tennessee State Museum, that our job as museum curators were to do the best we can to prolong the inevitable. The inevitable is everything is going to turn to dust. It may take 1,000,000 years. It may take 5 days. But the fact of the matter is all these memorials and things like that, someday will be gone, and Mother Nature will be sure of that. So you have to kind of get a realistic vision in your head. What is it that I'm doing by protecting these markers? And some of them are beautiful too. Oh my gosh. So those ones out of the cemetery we went to today, the Clark Cemetery, there were some interesting ones I took pictures of that I need to go research. So, TCA 4 talks about termination of the use of land as a cemetery. Now I want to point out, this was when I first walked into the job, day 1, I got this call and I knew nothing about any of this. This was a known cemetery in Rutherford County. It was actually its own tax-exempt plot. The county historian knew about it, family members knew about it, and they just decided to bulldoze it because they were developing the property to put a gun range, I think. Nevertheless, I don't know how it turned out, but they got sued, and rightfully so. Because guess what? Everybody knew that cemetery was there, and they claimed they didn't know it, and so the people were like, no, we knew the cemetery was there. You should have done due diligence to see if there was a cemetery there, because it was marked on a map. It was marked on a deed, too. So, you have to prove, is the cemetery abandoned or neglected? This is kind of tricky because different courts probably envision it as like I've got this one petition that came to our office today, and it's a cemetery that they claim has been neglected, but the last guy was buried in 2003. Well, the way the Tennessee Historical Commission looks at it, 50 years nobody has come and visited the cemetery or done anything. That makes it abandoned. And if somebody called me to the stand, that's what I would say, which is not going to do good if a landowner wants to relocate a cemetery. But as long as nobody calls me, I don't have to worry about that, and I'll leave it to y'all. You also have to prove, is the purpose of property surrounding a cemetery inconsistent with proper reverence for the dead? That is key also. If you're building an apartment complex, you probably don't want a cemetery in your courtyard, in the central courtyard. If I were a family member, I wouldn't want my people in that courtyard either. I would rather have a place that I could go visit it and I could cry or put flowers or whatever I want to do. The courtyard's not the place to do that. 46.4.102 defines interested parties. This is interesting because it can be family members, relatives, or anyone having the right of easement to the cemetery. And that can be government officials. Your local government has the right to visit any cemetery, whether they think so or not. So if somebody calls them, a matter of fact, codes can go out there. I've worked with codes departments in East Tennessee, and we go to cemeteries and nobody can say anything because the codes department can go anywhere. The reason why it's so weird to say family members is because people think that it's descendants, and it's not necessarily descendants, because some people don't have offspring and they might have a cousin, or they might, and so your great nephew or something like that may be the person that is able to come take care of your grave, and that's why they say family members and not descendants. 464103. Oh, and by the way, this applies to all cemeteries in Tennessee, whether commercial or historic. So that a commercial cemetery cannot close you out. You always have the right to go visit your loved ones. 103, actions and proceedings. The first thing that you have to do if you want to remove it or relocate a cemetery is you need to check to see if you really own the cemetery. And that's one thing that I'm really committed to. I've got a database right now that has over 32,000 cemeteries in Tennessee, and it is likely that I can tell you if you own it or not. Don't just guess, because I've had like an interesting situation in Rutherford County where a guy didn't like a cemetery because it was all overgrown and the family members didn't come take care of it, so a tree fell on his chicken coop, and so he decided to cut down all the trees in the cemetery. No, bad. And guess what? The family members found out. Now they're in mediation and he's got to make restitution. A complainant must first publish notice of intent to remove the graves or relocate the graves using press sources common to the county. So he can't just print up flyers and put it in the local record store. It has to be the most common things that most people read in the county, or listen to maybe, depending on how you do it. And you have to prove this to the court that you've done this. Step 3, the county chancery court must then be contacted to petition the cemetery for termination. The remaining interested parties are considered defendants. Now, this is where I come in. That petition, and you can do a petition or a notice, but most people send me both. A petition must be filed with our office because we have to post it on our website. And that is like, as of 2008, a new rule. So anytime somebody's moving a cemetery and they have not contacted our department and you know it, let me know. Be happy to check into it. 464104, judgments and decrees, termination or removal. Basically, a circuit court, the local circuit court, determines the outcome based on the evidence tied to 464101. I have been called as a witness in some of this. I try not to do that because I can imagine I'd be called to 32,000 cemeteries across the state. But if it's really important and there's something really bad, you can call me and I will show up. Let's see. So, and by the way, this is this is what I akin to people doing that during construction. It's like jumping your bulldozer up. We don't want that. TCA 46.8, Family Burial Grounds Protection. 101, the purpose is intended to provide notice to buyers of property with known burial grounds and grave sites. Sometimes people really don't know that grave sites are there, but that's why I'm collecting them. I encourage every single one of you, anytime you have a cemetery, whether you think I have it in my database or not, you can send me an email and by gosh, I'll talk to you about it, and if I don't have it in there, we'll locate where it is and I'll put it in the database. that will do a long way to preserve the cemetery in the future from accidents. So, 468102, definitions. It defines a crypt, a gravesite, and what human remains are. And human remains are human remains. Like I said, no pets. Although I do put pet cemeteries in the database just because it's kind of fun. So 103 tells a landowner that there is a duty to protect graves or crypt on that landowner's property or inside that landowner's property. Disturbances are prohibited. You can't run your cows through it. And then it tells you that if you don't like that, you can transfer the remains. Now, what this means is the landowner does not have to put a fence around it. He just has to keep it protected. If you're a family member and you say, well, that landowner should put a fence around my cemetery, I'd be like, nope, you have to do it. Because you're the family member. And you have the right to protect and beautify and maintain that cemetery. A lot of landowners do, because they don't want it to be overrun, because there are some landowners that actually have consciences. I know many of them. Some people that have done great things with cemeteries. And someday I'm going to have like a commendation list I'm checking to try to encourage people to do that. Haven't figured that one out yet. The cemetery owner has the duty to protect known graves. That doesn't mean he has to do anything. He just he must ensure that if he's transferring the property, even if it's to a relative, for free, the cemetery has to be listed on the deed if you know it's there. That is state law, and a lot of people do not do that. In fact, one of the things that I've run into a lot of times is cemeteries were on deeds, and somehow they've miraculously dropped off. But this says, nope, got to be on the deed. It also defines a prohibited area, and it defines it as 10 feet from any grave and 5 feet from a crypt. So somebody can't farm or build a house or an apartment complex within 10 feet of a known grave there. I always encourage landowners, if you are going to do anything around a cemetery, first of all I say don't, but the second thing is it would be a good idea to get somebody to do GPR to make sure your cemetery is not bigger than you think it is. Because if you build a house on a cemetery and start turning up bones, by law you got to stop. Okay, so this also notifies the owner that there's an option process for removal and refers them back to Tennessee 46-4. Criminal offenses. Why it's not in Title 46, I don't know. But here it is. TCA 39-17-311. Desecration of honored places or flags. A person may not desecrate a place of worship or a burial. For all intents and purposes, a burial is a place of worship. B, if you do desecrate a place of worship or burial, it's a Class A misdemeanor. However, there's something that goes against that that's really confusing, and I'll say that in a minute. And I always encourage people, it's not that if somebody just goes through and kills, destroys every headstone in a cemetery. I encourage people to charge them by the count, every headstone, because this looks like not very much, 11 months, 29 days in jail, and a fine of up to $2,500. But if you destroy 10 of them, yeah. Okay, so TCA 39-17-312, it defines absolutely that it is a Class E felony, prison time 1 to 6 years, and a fine of up to $3,000 for digging up a corpse. Whenever you're doing development and you start digging up bones, and they're human, sometimes Like somebody pointed out some bones to me the other day, and I said, yeah, those are deer bones. You know, I mean, there are people that can, probably around here, that can tell you. But when they turn up bones, I basically just call the sheriff's department, get them out there to determine what it is. The sheriff's department's supposed to do that. And you also, if it's human remains, you've got to call the health department, and you also got to contact the Department of Archaeology. That's not me. But if you contact me, I'll contact the Department of Archaeology, because I'm right in with them. But I always point out to people that if you do something bad, and by the way, does this look like an old body? Well, it's not. It's at the body farm. You don't know what you're digging up. So the reason why this is there, and the reason why you call the sheriff, is because you don't want to be an accessory to a crime. Because someone may have actually dug a grave and put somebody in it. And I've had police departments check that out some too. A guy came up and he found this whole huge area where it looked like a grave had been dug up. And I told him, I was like, man, call the police and get out there, because if you don't report it, all of a sudden you could be an accessory to a crime, and you don't want to go to prison for that. So it's always good to be safe, and it doesn't matter if it's pre-Columbian Native American human remains or anybody else. Human remains are human remains. I remember I grew up in the 1970s, and the Department of Archaeology back then, the state archaeologists were different than they are now. NAGPRA wasn't in there, and NAGPRA is federal law. But I remember when I was a kid, state archaeologists gave me bones to take home, and I even had a skull. This is why I've had bad luck all these years, too. I did have them reinterred, but I don't know if that helped. And I always also warn people, too, is, oh yeah, if you have a Class E felony, you lose the right to vote. So if you really want to vote and things like that, don't do that. So, what do I do if, that's you, not I. Well, actually, I can do it too. But if you witness desecration, it doesn't matter if you're a family member or just a bystander, report it to local police as soon as possible. I wish that everybody would report every instance, because I'm trying to get the state legislature to shore up cemetery law so it's more understandable in places. And if people know that there are all these police reports, they'll know that there's a problem, and maybe they'll do something. We'll see. You also have to contact the county court to notify them of desecration. And these two entities must uphold Tennessee law. If they refuse, call the regional DA. And if the regional DA doesn't act, call me, and I'll call the state district attorney. And we'll get somebody doing what they're supposed to. Now, I haven't had that problem yet. But there are 95 counties in Tennessee, and I've only worked with about 7 local governments so far, so I don't know. I imagine y'all's is probably pretty good here from what I've seen. So, corpse abuse. If you accidentally disinter a corpse, stop work immediately, call the police. Remember, you may have found a murder victim. Don't be an accessory. And call the Tennessee Department of Archaeology. This is my good friend Phil Hodge, who is also on the cemetery committee that I work with. If you can't reach him for some reason, call me and I'll call him. Or email him, because he'll respond to me. If you see an intentional disinterment, call the police immediately and get them out there now. Let's see. So, here's another weird thing that I discovered that's not in Title 46. TCA 685508. Notice it's not in the Title 46. It's under the Health Department section of the law. 508A says authorization for disinterment and reinterment in cases of movement of cemeteries or parts of cemeteries or for reuniting families shall be required prior to disinterment of a dead body or fetus. 508B, such authorization shall be issued by the state registrar to a licensed funeral director or person acting as such upon proper application. So basically, the health department has to be involved when you're doing a relocation. What we always say, and this is a good rule of thumb, if it's graves after the 1920s, you can use a funeral home. But before then, we suggest highly that you use an archaeology company. And I have a list of them. Let's see. Because a funeral home company might approach it different. I don't know. I have no idea. I've watched reinterments before, but not from a funeral home. So this is the thing that a lot of times courts will look at and say, well, this is from 1911. This is not a real law. Well, yes, it is. It is precedent. It's Walter Hines versus State. And of course, I think some of it's, anyway, the state of Tennessee. 149, 1060. It was done in 1911. Somebody challenged the new cemetery laws in Tennessee, and this is what they discovered. This sets the precedent in Tennessee, and it actually sets it across the nation. Other courts throughout the nation have referred to this decision. It is not technically a state statute. Parts of it are. Yet, and I'm working on some of that because it would erase a lot of confusion if it were fully incorporated. It defines interested party rights. You, as an interested party or family member, whatever you want to say, have the right to maintain, repair, and beautify your family cemetery or a cemetery where your family person is buried. Of course, this can get tricky because a cemetery may have people from other families in there too. So you don't want to do anything bad. Because, and again, I don't get involved in this, but that becomes a civil issue and somebody might complain. And trust me, if you call me and the other person calls me, I will direct y'all to the correct resources. I have no dog in the fight. It says you have the right of visitation if a landowner or somebody like that tries to block you from visiting a cemetery that's inside his property, his or her. That is illegal, and if that happens, you can call me. What I always tell people to do is call me first anyway. Try to contact the landowner first before you visit, and if you can't reach the landowner, call me and I will get in touch with you. But if you have a problem, I've been known to, I've had people that have problems visiting family cemeteries, and they don't know how to deal with it. And I'll write the landowner a letter with official state letterhead that says, I have gotten this call that you are blocking so-and-so, a caller from a cemetery, and they are a descendant, and I send them copies of the law and all this other stuff. My hope is when they see that state seal on there, that maybe they'll get a little nervous and try to figure out what to do. Usually they call me back, and I'll find out what's exactly going on, and then I hook up the parties so they can talk. You also even have the right of burial in your family cemetery. I always like to say if there's room, but it doesn't state that. What you don't want to do is bury somebody in a cemetery and then dig up another corpse. So what I always suggest people do is at least get, if you don't have a map of a cemetery and you don't know where empty plots are, get somebody out there with ground penetrating radar and at least locate a plot. Locate something that doesn't have a body under it. Because when you start, guess what happens if you start digging up a corpse? Then you have to stop and call the police and all that other stuff. So it's not worth it. But you have the right of burial in your family cemetery. It is perpetual. It declares a cemetery is a cemetery forever in perpetuity. Perpetuity. Unless, of course, Title 46.4 is somebody relocates the cemetery and goes through that process. Once a family member has declared a cemetery as a cemetery, forever it is a cemetery, and forever you can visit it, and forever you can be buried in it. Which, as you can imagine, can be interesting. A landowner cannot obstruct interested party visitation. There are ways sometimes, as a matter of fact, one of the first ones that I did, a landowner he was trying to make the way to the cemetery that people could visit, like down this other road, and it was like a road that he didn't keep up and everything, but I found out recently, because I looked in Tennessee code, that the entry point for anybody has to be to the closest road. Now, the landowner does not have to maintain a path for you. Does not have to do anything. But if you want to visit the cemetery, you can. Now, that's one reason why I say contact the landowner. Perhaps the landowner will work something out with you because you don't want to get shot or break a leg on his property. He doesn't want you to break a leg on his property either, trust me. The landowner also cannot desecrate. This also means plowing up headstones and using the land for something else, which people do. They used to do it in the past a whole lot, which is why my position exists. And trust me, I'm watching. Other relevant precedents. Well, Davis versus May in Texas, 2003, it confirmed, referring back to the 1911 decision, that the family has a right of ingress and egress to a cemetery. McCoy versus Barr in Kansas, 2012. These are recent cases, too. County employees are granted easement to maintain a cemetery if they so want to. Rhodes versus Nicholas in Missouri, 1981. Relatives are granted a right to restrain an owner from interfering with a cemetery's purpose. So if an owner is trying to keep you from burying somebody in that family cemetery, no, bad, call me, I'll take care of it. Stoker versus Brown, Tennessee, 1979. Cemetery area, this declares, and this is, the cemetery area is the same as it ever was, even though it looks like it miraculously shrank. Because people will try to get closer and closer and take more of the cemetery land and plow it and make it smaller and smaller. I'm working on a case up now in Carter County where this may have happened. He's still in the middle of it, but apparently it was a large cemetery, and man, there's some evidence. It looks like that people moved tombstones from one area and they packed them together and made the cemetery smaller. And one of the things that really tricked it off was one of the stones was upside down. And trust me, I'm working on it. We GPR'd the area and everything. I did. ETSU did. They were very nice. So, why can't I plow up a cemetery? It's my land. This reminds me of when my father-in-law, who has 1,800 acres in Arkansas, this is my land. I can do anything I want. I can pour oil on it or whatever. And you know what I told him? I said, if you really want to look at it, you're just renting it from God. He's like, well, I didn't think about it that way. I was like, I know. It's not your land. It is your land temporarily. So first of all, the cemetery might not really be yours. That's why we always check ownership. You need to call the Register of Deeds to confirm, or you can call me. I can probably tell you pretty quick. Even if it is yours, you still must leave it alone. Maintaining it is probably but you don't want to maintain it with a bush hog. Just maintain it with, be nice to it. Because technically, if a family member got mad at how you were maintaining a cemetery, it's not your cemetery. They can be mad and they can sue you about it. There is a legal process for relocation, so you can see 46.4. And if the rules make you angry, this is why I had Blackstone up there in the Constitution earlier. Blame English common law, because that's where the United States cemetery laws come from. Blame the First Amendment to the Constitution, which declares basically it's the religious part of the Constitution. You can't go tear up a cemetery, because if you do, you are interfering with someone else's religion. Can't do that. I've actually told lawyers this too. They were like, well, I don't understand. Isn't this a civil matter? I was like, well, no, actually it's a First Amendment of the Constitution. Because somebody is blocking somebody from, they were blocking somebody from doing a, what do you call it, a decoration day in their family cemetery. I was like, yeah, well that's against the First Amendment, man. You're talking civil rights stuff there. And Tennessee does have civil rights laws put into, I've got where they are, I don't have them in this, but I know where they are. Also, you can blame yourself for purchasing the land before you knew the law. Have you ever heard of that term, let the buyer beware? My dad was like a businessman, and man, he drained that. He drilled it in my head. Now, that doesn't mean I get mad at people when they rip me off, because it is maddening. But just be careful. So, what should I do if I'm a landowner? Follow the law. If you don't, you're going to lose. It's expensive, and it will take up your limited time on earth. My father-in-law has dementia, bless his heart, but he had the county in Arkansas close this road that went through his property. And they did, and somehow he got the idea that it was his road. Well, there was an adjacent field that belonged to someone else, and they had an access point. And that was how they got their combines in. So, no problem, everything's been fine. Then his crazy daughter moved home, and she started getting paranoid that everybody's trying to kill her. So all of a sudden, she started saying, well, we've got to close that road. And they went and they put a gate on it and everything, and all this other stuff. Well, the other people got mad. They were like, you can't put a gate on that. I have access to that. And of course, Big Daddy in his state was like, no, that's my road. They told me that was my road. And they spent, oh my gosh, he spent $20,000 getting a resurvey and doing stuff in court and everything like that. And guess what they found out about the road? It was actually on the other people's property. It's not worth it. Work things out. Do something else with your time. Be nice. Visitors may be annoying, and I've had some callers that are kind of annoying sometimes, and I can see how they know to be irritated by them. But try to work something out if they request access. Call me if there's a problem. Don't just do what you want and hope no one finds out. If you do, interested parties will call me and I'll investigate. Trust me, my investigation will really, really annoy you, because I find every crack and crevice, and I'm very, very friendly like Andy Griffith. So I will be so friendly. But don't mistake my friendliness as not trying to help somebody reconcile, follow the law. I'm not a cop, no, but I know cops. And I know district attorneys. I know people that can cause problems if you don't do right. Visitors, be courteous. There are many reasons a landowner is reluctant to have you on his or her property. You might be somebody going up there sparking with your girlfriend and drinking beer. Well, guess what? Those people aren't permitted in a cemetery, and a landowner has every right to call the cops on somebody out there doing that. If you're a family member going to visit and you haven't contacted the landowner, he or she may do the same thing. And then, of course, you have to figure everything out. Figure out things before you visit. If you haven't already, a lot of people have already made relationships with landowners. But I find it all the time. Well, I went out to go visit and a landowner confronted me with a gun. I was like, did you call him? No. I'm like, well, that's what's going to happen. Because he does have the right, remember, he has to, by law, protect the cemetery. Even if he doesn't do anything to it. Part of protecting the cemetery is keeping ruffians out of the cemetery. If a landowner is a curmudgeon, be nice anyway and document everything. Always document, document, document. When people call me, that's what I tell them. I was like, man, when you get emails, when you get phone calls, whatever, document stuff. And guess what? You can send me PDFs and I'll put them in the cemetery file. And I keep records of the ongoing, whatever is going on at the cemetery. And not only do that for historical purposes, because 200 years from now somebody might need that information, but it also shows that there is interest in a cemetery. It's not abandoned. There's a lot of reasons why I keep that documentation. So if you're having a problem with a landowner, or vice versa, even if you're a landowner having a problem with a visitor, document it. But smile, don't be mean, because all it's going to do is make them mean. I guarantee it. Also, visitor, follow the law. If you don't, you're going to incur unwanted expenses and penalties. So don't go and desecrate. It's very, there's a gray area. And one of the cemeteries that I'm working with right now, there are 2 family members. And one of the family members took it upon himself to move the 3 monuments that were in the cemetery to another cemetery. Of course, he didn't dig up the graves. He says there's no graves there. So basically, he had to have GPR done, which is expensive. And actually, he did it on the cheap. And I told him I couldn't support their findings because there wasn't a report. And now he has to do it again. So the fact of the matter is, does he have the right to move if they're monuments, does he have the right to move them? Well, yeah, but you know what? Your family member is going to get mad, and your family member will have a nice civil court with you, and I won't be involved at all. Now, if you are a person that is not a family member and you remove the headstones, that's called desecration. And report it. So, let's see. The last slide. For more information, and not only do I have a lot, but I'm finding out more on a daily basis. I find out new things every day. You can call me. I had my ponytail pulled back then so that I look respectable. I am Graham Perry, the Historic Cemetery Preservation Specialist at the Tennessee Historical Commission. Here's my number. I also have cards I'll give you if you need them. I hope I have enough for everybody. And graham.perry@tn.gov is my email. I answer every email. And the funny thing is I like to have a paper trail so that I can put it in the cemetery files. I respond best to email, but if you call, I'll call you too. And then I'll tell you, hey, why don't we contact by email? That's usually what I do. Because I like to have a paper trail of everything so I know what's going on. Division of Archaeology, Phil Hodge, there's his number right there. And he's phil.hodge@tn.gov. And I will open it up to questions, but first Ernest Tubb would like to say thanks. Thanks a lot. Anybody have any questions or answers? I'll take answers.
Question. We have a lot of sandy soil in western Dyer County in the hills.
Yes, you do.
And some of the bodies may have become disinterred by natural.
By natural, yeah.
Is it up to the landowner to protect the cemetery?
You know, matter of fact, that was just brought up to me today. I'm going to have to research that. I need to call Phil Hodge, because I bet that's something they've had to deal with. I haven't had to deal with it yet. But let me know. Yeah, I mean, certainly email me and tell me that again. I need to find that out. That's a very interesting topic. But you're right about the soil. I mean, soil goes away out here. I lived in Memphis for 15 years. I spent a lot of time out in the woods and things like that here, so I do understand about the soil. Anybody else? Oh, everybody. Why not everybody all at once? Okay, I saw your hand first.
Okay, you mentioned that in our little family cemeteries, there's a beautiful one, it's the Blackman Cemetery outside of Columbia.
Okay.
Which is where my revolutionary war patriot is buried. I mean, every contact, and I don't know if I want to be buried there, but it's plenty of room, or there may be family members. I mean, who says, oh, there, you show up and shovel?
Well, I will tell you this. I do know enough about Tennessee law to know that when you're outside of basically city jurisdictions and towns, they have the right to set their own rules about that. So if it's within city limits, you have to check with the city.
It's at the end of a cul-de-sac in a...
If it's out in a rural area, you can actually bury somebody in the backyard, and you don't need, all you have to do is you have to call the health department and tell them, well, you can call me if you want to, but you have to tell them that somebody died because you don't want people to think you murdered someone. But yeah, you have to get a death certificate and get all that, and then you can just, I mean, you can put them in the ground. You don't have to wrap them in anything.
I just didn't know, like, because there'd be lots of England people who would, you just show up and would say, this is a nice place.
Well, and I've had an issue where, and of course I can't get involved in this. This is a family issue, but somebody had this plot in a family cemetery. They wanted to be buried next to someone. Well, another person didn't know that. So another person said, man, I want to be buried next to this same person. So they went and they took an urn with ashes and they dug a grave right there. So when they came back, there was a grave there. And of course they called me and they're like, what do you do? I was like, man, that is between you and the family member. I cannot help you with that. I can see why they're mad, but I mean, I would, if there was anything, what I would do is I would explain the law about, I'd send them information about what the law says and what they need to know before they approach it. So I will do that, but I will not get involved. I know how family stuff goes. So anyway, yeah, if you have a question about it, just email me. Because I know the folks down there pretty well. So, matter of fact, I bet that one's in my database. Someone else? Who else? I'll let you real very quick and I'll get there.
If you know a family member is buried into a small cemetery, it's just basically a church cemetery, and they don't have any records of where that buried. How do you go
Very
about?
common.
How do you go about? Everybody that's left, they go to that church, records got shuffled.
Yep.
And we think we know about where they were buried at, but there's no mark there. The marker's gone.
And some churches do keep maps. If a church hasn't kept a map, you're really kind of up a creek. The only thing that you can do is, and I tell people this all the time, it's like your last hope is to call the county archives and see if somebody from that church has donated an old map or something like that. But if you don't have a map and people don't know where people are buried, other than you can guess. Now, can you go mark the grave anyway? Sure. You don't know where it is.
But if we mark that, if I was going to mark that grave, that might be somebody else's.
You can put a memorial up. I just say if you do that, put it on the fringe of the cemetery and don't try to guess, because somebody will get mad about that. Well, they might, but people get mad about everything these days. But yeah, I hate to tell people that, but and this is why I get people now. I try to get counties and things like that. Like Davidson County actually got a grant from our office, but not from me, but from the federal grant, to resurvey their cemeteries, and what they're doing with the money, they're not only going back to make sure the cemeteries are still there, but they are going to GPS locate every grave that is still identifiable.
They're gonna test them for DNA. So they
Well,
know.
they're not gonna dig them up.
I mean, they'll never know that.
But I will say this, I encourage everybody across the state to do that. If you've got like a single cemetery, I've got like a little GPS function in here, in my phone. And you can just go there and go to every grave and put your GPS point and name who's buried there. Move on, just take the information down and save it, because that way there won't be a problem like that in the future. So at this point, I'm looking at future rather than past. What's done in the past is really difficult for me to deal with a lot of times. Archives. Yes?
We got this great-great-grandfather, Elwood, in Memphis.
Oh, yeah.
Marker.
I know Elmwood well.
But they've got a number of graves, but no markers. There's a few graves in the road mark, and you sort of interpolate when markers to see where a given number was.
Right.
I just wondered,
Elmwood is one of the cemeteries that has some really good records, and they keep them there. And I can get you in touch with them, the person we talked to there. But they have very good records. Now, I will tell you this about Elmwood, when I found this out, and this is one of those weird gray areas again. I had a caller, and they were upset because there was a family burial plot, and Elmwood tried to sell the plot because nobody was buried there. And I actually called Elmwood. I said, well, you really can't sell a plot that belongs to somebody. And their response was, well, we were kind of grandfathered in. Since we're such an old cemetery, we set our own rules before the state rules were there. So after 100 years, if somebody's not buried in a plot, we could sell it. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what they told me, and there might be something to it. I don't really know how to research that, but yeah, they've been around since 1850s. So they probably did have rules and things for their cemetery, and that may have been one of them, and they may have gotten it under before the state law got passed. They're kind of like a commercial cemetery. I don't know, and again, I don't deal with modern cemeteries, but I don't know that if somebody had bought a plot today, if anybody could be buried there at all, if the cemetery could actually make rules to do that. But Elmwood claims they have a rule, and I don't know really how to deal with that yet. They didn't end up selling the plot because the lady just groaned a lot. Whenever somebody does something you don't like, just be annoying. Except don't be annoying. Don't be annoying to landowners and things like that. Elmwood is okay. You're big. You had a question.
Yeah, but I want to tell you something, but in response to what y'all were talking about plots and cemeteries, I have a really interesting story. So my maternal side of my family, there were a lot of them.
Mm-hmm.
And so they lived they were buried in an Oddfellows cemetery.
Yeah.
And they lined the sides. So it's a pretty big area. And there was a road that went between. So like my grandfather's buried on this side with a bunch of the family.
Right.
And my great-grandfather and his father are buried on the right side with a bunch of the family. And the road went between them. And they all had the curbing around them and fences. Well, the cemetery, Oddfellows, decided that they needed to get more space. So they started selling the road and closing it off so you can't get to it. So now we have strangers in the middle of our families. So So just because you think something is there,
Oh, yeah,
doesn't mean that it is what you think it is.
right.
Because we didn't own the road.
Yeah, that's interesting. If anything, I mean, if I can get on top of that stuff early, I can
Yeah.
discourage people from
This
doing
happened
it.
in Starkville, Mississippi.
Right.
And so,
That don't have anything to do with Starkville, that's Mississippi State.
sorry. So my mother went and found all the records and went to an attorney and actually had the paperwork done to pass them over to me as owner so that we don't have any issues
Right.
down the road, because there have been a couple of stragglers, we don't know where they came from.
Right.
But I mean, I think they've owned those plots for, I don't know, 100 years.
Yeah, if you have paperwork that says this is my plot, they
Yeah.
cannot do anything to it.
But it happens.
You know?
The other thing I wanted to tell you is, you're talking about interesting cemeteries. There is, I don't know, y'all might have driven by it today, but the African American Cemetery, the Fairview Cemetery, are you
Is that
familiar
one we
with
went
that?
today?
Y'all were at.
No,
the-
that's
No.
a different one.
Okay.
It is amazing. So if you come back over here in the daytime.
I think I've got that one in my database.
It has headstones that are homemade, and they've got shells in them.
Yeah.
I've got a whole database of pictures, so if
Oh,
I can
you
send
can
them
you
to
can send them
you.
to me, I'll
They are
save
awesome.
them.
But there's a bad story behind that one. My great-grandmother bought 4 plots over there. And then it belonged to this, it was a person that owned the whole cemetery. It was much smaller than it is today. She died, she got buried there. She had 3 plots left. And it's been empty for 40 years now. She's owned it. My mother dies, she goes to get buried, she wants to be buried right beside her mother. The city took over the cemetery now, and then they said, okay, we have no records of it being sold. So we have to pay it $1,500 to get the plot to bury her next.
Really?
So
See, if you
they've
had a
been
record
empty
of the
for
plot,
20
they could do
years.
that. My father had a grave for his first wife, a grave site. Actually, he buried her, and then he had one next to her for him. But then, of course, he met my wonderful mother, and that never happened. So when my parents died, I still had that plot, but it was in Woodlawn Cemetery up in Nashville, which is like a serious, serious commercial cemetery. I had the paperwork for that, and I went to them and I said, I still have this plot, and they said, yes, and you can sell it if you want, because that's what I was trying to do, because nobody in my family wanted to be buried next to somebody we weren't related to. And actually, it was interesting because I went through Macklemore Auctions up in Nashville, and they had never done any kind of gravesite sale before. And the reason why they can now sell stuff from Woodlawn Cemetery is because they know how to do it. It's my fault. Yes. Yes. It's paper. You just gotta have paperwork, word of mouth ain't gonna
And
do it.
even if you do have that paperwork, it's a good idea to go back and get it updated.
Yes.
Because that's what my mother was afraid of, that because my father had passed, and it was from his family, that there could be issues.
Right. And if you send me PDFs of it,
I can send you the stuff from here on those headstones, but my family's buried in Mississippi.
yeah, we don't do anything.
No, you don't do Mississippi. It's too bad, it's a great place.
Let me get you.
I have been told by several people that they're part of Hopewell Cemetery out on Millsville Highway, that part of that, there is a slave cemetery there, or slave
It could be.
graves there. Is there any, when we lived in Oak Ridge, there was a slave cemetery that was set aside. I mean, and it's
Yeah, and there's
If there was
no
some
general
kind of
rule
grant.
to that. It's like sometimes the cemeteries are segregated, sometimes the enslaved person cemetery is way, way, way far away from the other. I mean, I'm dealing with the same issue right now with this cemetery in Davidson County. they knew that there was an African-American, they called it the enslaved person cemetery. And the guy that was supposedly buried in was a slave, but nobody had ever, like, really marked where it was. They just went to go visit it. And fortunately, there was one lady, but I mean, even she goes out there and the terrain's changed so much, she didn't know where it is. But the way that particular family did it, which is interesting, I've never seen this before. The family was on one side of the road going up to the house, and the enslaved person's burial ground was right on the other side of the road. I hadn't seen that yet. A lot of times they're separate cemeteries and nowhere near, and you don't know where they are. I know that at Wessington Plantation, up in Robertson County, the African-American cemetery is way, way far away, but they've identified it, and they've actually got a historical marker there now.
Is there any, are there grants or anything that can be done?
With African-American cemeteries, the options expand. So yeah, get in touch with me about that. There are a few extra grants you can try to apply for. Not through me, unfortunately, because they never give me any money, but if I only had $1 billion. I thought someone else, did you have a question?
I did have a question. This, we have an early 1800s gravesite at our church. The church was founded in 1854.
Right.
We know there are people buried out there that were born in the early 1800s.
Right.
The county was founded in 1823, so that's one of the first graveyards in the county. About half of the cemetery is documented.
Right.
The other half is not. So you've given me a lot of answers to a lot of my questions already. The biggest problem we have is there's some handmade gravestones out there. There are a lot of them that are tipping over. There are a lot of them that are illegible. And my main concern is documenting who those people are. And my main question to you is, what can you do to repair these tipping over and falling apart gravestones without desecrating?
I am so glad you mentioned that. There are going to be 2 workshops very soon. One is on the 29th and one is on the 31st. The 31st is going to be in Jackson. I haven't made a flyer yet, but Jonathan Appel, who is a master conservator of headstones and things like that, he's actually a friend of Jason Church's. Jason Church, of course, is the guru at National Park Service. So we're going to have a workshop there in Jackson, and we're going to have a workshop also in New Johnsonville. So it's kind of within the area. Jackson's probably closer to y'all, I guess. If you want to find out firsthand, it's free. Come on out. Just, yeah, email me and I'll send you the information.
29th of what, March?
29th of March is going to be at New Johnsonville. 31st is going to be at the big cemetery. What's the main one in Jackson?
Hollywood.
I'm sorry?
Hollywood.